Rav Hutner adds that instead of looking at the Tikiyah as a reenactment of our creation, he points out that Tikiyah is actually an opposite process, because Hashem created us by blowing His essence into us. Shofar, we're blowing it out. So he makes the very startling metaphor that shofar is symbolic death. It is essentially giving back our lives to God, as if to say to Hashem, I know my life is in your hands, and I'm giving it back to you. And then I beseech you to let me have another chance. It's the experience of death. In a way, one of the things that we invoke on Rosh Hashanah again and again is we invoke the merit of the Akedah. The Akedah Yitzchak happens on Rosh Hashanah. In fact, halachically, although it's not required, but in the halachic preference of things, an ideal shofar should be a ram's horn. As they say, a lot of those long, big shofars are not ram's horns. They are, in fact, antelopes, and they are kosher as well. But a ram's horn, an ayil, has preference. And the reason that's so is because it is a remembrance of the Akedat Yitzchak. By the way, I'll tell you a beautiful short word, just I guess for a moment, from Rav Meir Shapira, the Lubliner Rav, the one who founded Daf Yomi, one of the great Gedolei Rabbanim in Poland before World War II. It's brought down in the Medrash that when Avraham was taking Yitzchak to be sacrificed, the Satan came in the guise of all sorts of angels to try to convince him not to do it, that Hashem really doesn't want it. And Avraham Avinu ignored the Satan and went ahead and was willing to make this supreme sacrifice. At the end, an angel appears from heaven and tells Avraham, don't do it, and Avraham listens. So the question is, how did Avraham know that this was a genuine message from God? Maybe it's just another Satan trick trying to dissuade him. How does he know? Now, of course, this is actually a variation on maybe a more difficult question that Kierkegaard already raised. And that is, how does he know that the original commandment to slaughter Yitzchak or bring it is from God? That is also a very, very difficult question. But putting that difficult question aside, if Avraham Avinu has accepted the legitimacy of that first message, and he's not accepting the ersatz cancellations because he considers it to be the Satan, then how does he know the last one is a cancellation? So Rav Meir Shapiro says, because when the last message told him, don't sacrifice Yitzchak, go after the ram was not easily obtainable. The ram was admired and intertwined in branches and bushes. It had to be disentangled. But Meir Shapiro says, if things come easy, you got to suspect they're from the Satan. If things come hard, then they're genuine spiritual imperatives. So when Avraham Avinu said, gee, it is hard for me to get this ram, that's coming from Hashem, because the nature of what God gives us is God gives us gifts that we struggle for and we have to work for, because that's part of the process of how we become better. This is why Rabbi Shapiro said, that's why Avraham Avinu knew, if it's hard, then I believe it comes from Hashem. Okay. But be it as it may, what does it mean when we want to commemorate the Akedah? We have to remind Hashem of the Akedah. God doesn't remember the Akedah. We blow the ram's horn, and Hashem says, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah, you're right. That was a good thing that Abraham did thousands of years ago. Yeah, I'm going to count that to your benefit. Hashem certainly remembers. What is this point of remembering the Akedah? But the answer is very, very pashut. The issue here is not to remind Hashem of anything. The issue is to remind us and to re-experience it. Not that we've forgotten it either, but to re-experience it. And by developing within us a willingness, not necessarily to do that particular action, but generally to sacrifice for Hashem, that elicits divine mercy, because we connect to that experience of the Akedah. So Rav Hutner says, the blowing of the shofar is a symbolic death. It is the willingness of turning our lives over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that way we are experiencing in our own essence the Akedah, and that brings the merit of the Akedah down to us. Again, the lesson of the Akedah is twofold, very, very interesting. The lesson of the Akedah, number one, is a person must be willing to do anything to serve Hashem. The second lesson is Hashem is teaching you, but I don't want you to serve me that way. In other words, there is a lesson both in the commandment of the Akedah, and there's a lesson in the withdrawal of the commandment of the Akedah. The lesson of the Akedah is our absolute willingness, and the other aspect of the Akedah is Hashem is telling us how He wants to be served, and this is not the way that He wants it. So obviously, God forbid, I'm not suggesting in any shape or manner that there should be any thought in our mind, I would even slaughter my child, God forbid. That's not what you think. But you take the Akedah as the metaphor for submitting yourself to Hashem and being willing to do whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks of us in life. So that is the notion of symbolic death.